This is our final episode on the Cleveland kidnapping case, featuring excerpts of my exclusive interview with one of Ariel Castro's former victims, Michelle Knight. All those years of being conditioned to being in captivity, and suddenly, these women and Amanda's young daughter could taste real freedom. But I can assure you, the journey to recovery, well, it certainly would not be easy. Now, Michelle was separated from the other two because she didn't have family. So there was nowhere for her to return home to. As a result, she was sent to a hospice. And this hospice was in the middle of nowhere. And you're probably asking, why was she sent to a hospice? Well, it was really a lack of resources that sent her there. And she was quite ill. She had so many complications. She was almost blind. She had problems with her vision going into this 11 years. Then she was kept in the dark so much that her eyesight really faded further. She had multiple head trauma. So there were all kinds of problems with potential seizures. She had tremors that she was having to deal with. She had digestive problems. She had so many blows to her abdomen and all. She was just not a well individual. When she came in, she just had the clothes on her back, and we helped her get new clothes, helped her connect with a lawyer that she felt supported by to review everything that she did, because she's not lacking in intelligence, but she was lacking in worldliness and sophistication. So we were able to connect her with a lawyer, actually a former judge, that was able to guide her through all the decisions that she had facing her at the time. Now, she ended up going to culinary school, and we connected her with one of the leading literary agents in the country. She was able to write a very compelling book that was a huge success. I mean, obviously she had such a compelling story, and with the help of this agent and some people assisting her in getting her story told, the book was a New York Times bestseller. She actually was able to buy her own home and did get married and really set about building a beautiful life for herself. And we were so happy to be able to support her, because she did enjoy so much success from the book and speaking and things like that. She actually had quite a sum of money to manage, and the lawyer was able to help her do that, so she didn't get preyed upon by those that would try to take advantage of her and get her to make foolish investments and things like that. So she really got everything that she deserved. And I have to tell you, Michelle, coming out of all of that, was such a warrior, such a fighter. She never had a victim attitude. She was always a warrior, survivor, and that attitude carried her forward in such meaningful ways. It's hard to imagine, and I can only relate to you what I have learned from talking to those that have been held captive for extended periods of time, what the long-term effects of captivity truly are. There are psychological effects. One being post-traumatic stress. That's a disorder. I mean, it's a real thing, and it's not just psychological, it's neurologically. Your brain actually changes. It changes in structure. It changes in terms of the arrangement of your thoughts, your neurotransmitters. You actually have, after it's all over, your mind can't just shift gears and say, oh, I'm free now. I'll start thinking like everybody else does. You have intrusive thoughts, you have nightmares, you have flashbacks, you become hypervigilant. Whether you've been in prison or you've been kidnapped or you've been a prisoner of war, whatever it is, where your freedom, your ability to think and navigate and make choices, and if you've been tortured and beaten, it's hard to imagine that that won't continue to happen. It's hard to trust that you're in an environment where that's not part of your existence. You've become shaped and conditioned to it. And there are certain things that you associated with that torture, with those beatings, with that pain, with that fear. And sometimes it's a loud noise that happened when you were being beaten. Sometimes it's the sound of footsteps in the hallway that preceded you being tortured. Sometimes it's something as random as a clock ticking, or a certain scent or aroma that was associated with the experience. It could be something as random as ambient light in a room. It could be anything that you may be associated with that terrible experience. And then when that reoccurs randomly in the real world, it can throw you back into the fight or flight reactions you had when the trauma was occurring. Many people experience anxiety and depression, just persistent fear and difficulty coping. And there is definitely increased risk of depression. People often struggle with saying, how could I let that happen to me? Why did I survive when maybe others didn't? How can I forgive myself? All kinds of intrusive thoughts and emotions well up inside. You realize you've lost so much time. How can you ever catch up? And you become overwhelmed. Oftentimes, if you've been kept in isolation, there's cognitive impairment. You have memory issues, trouble concentrating. You can't make a decision because for so long you had no decisions to make. And that skill set atrophied. And if you've been held in isolation, you have trouble reconnecting with people. You have trouble forming relationships or participating in even small groups. You can experience a tremendous degree of shame because of what's happened to you. You feel like you're marked. There may have been times that you adapted to the situation and tried to befriend or connect to your torturer, your captor, and you feel terribly guilty about that. And you think, did I cause this? There were times that I found some comfort for a few minutes here and there. How sick and twisted am I? You may have known at the time, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to stay sane. But you look back on it and say, how could I do that? How could I smile at this person? How could I seek to please them? I must have wanted this. I must have liked this. You start being a revisionist historian and changing all of this in a way that blames yourself. So all of this comes boiling up and just overwhelming you. And how do you sort all of this out? I've had prisoners that have been exonerated and taken off death row that say just the ability to walk in a straight line for 100 yards is overwhelming. They get tremendous anxiety from it. They're so used to walking in a 10-foot oval that when they're able to just go straight as long as they want to, it's anxiety producing and overwhelming. The idea of having any kind of healthy relationship, the ability to trust, is just so taken away. And then the physical side of things, weakness from lack of exercise, malnutrition, lingering health issues from deprivation. is just so overwhelming. Just activities of daily living are such a challenge. So you're physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything is compromised. You want to celebrate, but are afraid to. These women have had to process the trauma they went through, the time that they lost in the world, and they were there long enough that the world changed. Technology, the internet, smartphones, all the things that happened while they were gone created a huge gap. And then they had to reconcile what Ariel Castro did to them. Coming up, we'll come back to what these amazing women have been up to in their years since their escape. But first, let's discuss what happened to Ariel Castro, the twisted mind behind all of this. War in Iran is heating up, and the fallout's reaching us fast. Markets are rattled, global confidence is shaky, and investors are bracing for what's next. This week alone, hedge funds moved billions into hard assets, while central banks quietly stockpiled gold. In times like these, smart people don't sit back. They move toward safety. For me, that means gold and silver. Secure your future now while there's still time. Text DrPhil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. Gold is already up big this year, and with more volatility ahead, you cannot afford to wait. You could even get up to $15,000 in free silver with a qualified purchase. Don't wait for the next market shock. Text DrPhil to 50505 now before it's too late. You say Castro pulled it off for 11 years, but he did it with brutality. He did it with intimidation, pain, and torture. And it seems he did get careless towards the end, leaving that door unbolted. Was that a rookie mistake? Or was it from arrogance of him actually convincing himself that in time they actually wanted to be there? That they were competing for his attention? That maybe they had fallen in love with him? That maybe Amanda was his wife? They had a family. You got to be pretty sick to convince yourself of that, but maybe it's what caused him to leave that door open. Whatever it was, don't you know they were thrilled he did? So what happened to Ariel Castro? Well, I, for one, think he got exactly what was coming to him. The very same day Amanda, Michelle, and Gina were rescued, Castro was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot. Ultimately, he pled guilty to 937 of the staggering 977 charges leveled against him by prosecutors, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder. As part of the plea deal, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years without the possibility of parole. Under the agreement, he waived his right to appeal. He also forfeited all assets, including his Seymour Avenue house, which was later demolished. And believe me, that was a house that needed to be leveled to the ground. He was also fined $100,000. Symbolic, I'm sure. Of course, no sentence could ever truly account for the horrors these women endured, but life behind bars with no chance of freedom was as close to justice as the system could deliver. Before his sentencing in August of 2013, Castro delivered a nearly 20-minute statement in court. Now, listen, after you have confessed to what he had done, you got to be pretty narcissistic, toxic psychopath to stand up and brazenly claim to be a good person and insist that you're not, quote, not a monster. He attributed his actions to being mentally sick. with a lifelong addiction to sex and pornography. Well, we need to talk about that a little bit, because on the one hand you think, well, he was sick, because nobody but a sick, twisted jerk could do something like this. Well, you know what? Having been trained in forensic psychology, you have to think about what it means in a legal sense to be mentally ill, what it means in a legal sense to be insane. At what point does that become a defense? Because clearly, to do what he did, this is not a healthy person. This guy was twisted. No doubt about it, but that's not the test in a legal sense. I can tell you from a forensic psychology standpoint that how you think about being sick, mentally ill, having a diagnosis, and being accountable versus hiding behind that as an excuse, as a defense, are two very different things. When I had to deal with these things from a forensic psychology standpoint, I often looked at it very simply as determining the difference between an irresistible impulse versus an impulse not resisted. Now, let me explain what I mean. An irresistible impulse would be something that an insane person, for example, a psychotic individual that believes something so to the core of their soul, they were so delusional, they were having such hallucinations that they could not distinguish reality from fantasy. They could not tell the difference. And if they fully believed that God was telling them or Satan was telling them that they had to do something, and they could not distinguish between reality and fantasy. So they had this irresistible impulse that they did not have the ability to fight off. That was very different than having an impulse that they chose not to resist. Big difference. Irresistible impulse or impulse not resisted. And I would fight to the end of the earth that Ariel Castro was dealing with impulses he chose not to resist. He was not under some irresistible impulse here. He did not have some drive within him, some voice talking to him, some hallucination or delusion that pushed him to do this, where he was possessed and had to do what he did. No, that wasn't the case in my opinion. My opinion was he was arrogant, belligerent, narcissistic, sociopathic, and everything that goes with it. A lack of empathy, a lack of caring, seeing things from his own point of view, not caring about what others thought or how they felt, choosing to ignore social norms, deceitful, con man, impulsive, hostile, aggressive, abusive, reckless disregard for his safety or that of others, complete lack of remorse. He just chose to be hedonistic. He chose to cave to his impulses. He chose immediate gratification. He chose not to get help for his lack of impulse control. And he knew it was wrong. Otherwise, why did he go to such great lengths to hide it? Despite overwhelming evidence, he denied ever beating or torturing the women and outrageously claimed that quote, most of their sexual encounters were consensual. He shifted between half-hearted apologies and placing blame. He actually called out the FBI for failing to catch him, and even at one point faulted his victims for getting into a car with a stranger. He blamed them. They got in the car. They should know better than that. He also made disturbing assertions about their past as if that somehow justified his crimes. These weren't good girls. Then in a final attempt to rewrite history, he said, quote, I hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive me because we had a lot of harmony going on in that home, end quote. Seriously. This guy stood up in that courtroom and said that. Coming up, what Michelle said to Castro in that courtroom, the man who had caused her so much pain and so much torture. I used to sleep terribly, but thankfully I found Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend that's packed with ingredients shown to improve sleep. Plus, Beam is founded in America and run by people who share our values like hard work and integrity. Their Dream Powder is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. Beam's already improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep, helping people wake up and feel their best. Here's the deal. Beam's giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off so you can try their best-selling Dream Powder. Visit shopbeam.com/DrPhil and use code DrPhil at checkout for up to 40% off. That's shopbeam.com/DrPhil, code DrPhil for up to 40% off. Support an American company. Invest in yourself and get your best sleep tonight. Let me go way back to the first time he took Michelle in that house and hung her between two walls like a fish. We had a lot of harmony in that house. Let's go back to him chaining her to a post with a helmet on and not allowing her to shower for months and months at a time. But we had a lot of harmony in that house. Beating her into miscarriage multiple times. We had a lot of harmony in that house. No, there wasn't any harmony in that house, you son of a bitch. But on that day, shackled in his orange Department of Justice uniform, he was forced to face reality. Standing silent as Michelle Knight and the families of Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus finally had their chance to speak. And this is what Michelle said to Castro in that courtroom, to the man who had caused her so much pain and so much torture. You took 11 years of my life away. I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning. I will overcome all that has happened, but you will face hell for eternity. I will live on. You will die a little every day as you think of the 11 years of atrocities that you inflicted on us. I can forgive you, but I will never forget. Powerful, powerful words from Michelle Knight there. Now, Castro's demeanor in the courtroom, his lack of accountability are so typical of narcissistic sociopaths that just can't own it. They just can't take accountability for their wrongdoings. He wasn't particularly unique. He was garden variety and not very smart. His immense ego and pride did not allow him to have the guts to tell the truth. Instead, he made excuses for himself. In his statement to the judge at his sentencing, he claimed that for 21 years he was, in his words, quote, a good bus driver who slacked off towards the end. He described himself as an emotional person. Yeah. No person with feeling could have done what he did. He was not an emotional person. He was just mouthing the words. He tried to gain sympathy for himself, but his deeds were so egregious and cruel that anything kind he tried to say about himself, well, it just fell on deaf ears. As well it should. The fact that Castro had the gall to say most of the sex was consensual with the women, which was a lie, and that this was a happy household. Talk about not reading the room. He's holding these women captive year after year and says, most. I only raped them some of the time. If that was true, which it wasn't, if that was true, what does he think that gets him? I only raped them some of the time? Does he think the judge is going to go, oh, well, okay. It was just some of the time. And if you had a few laughs along the way, well, then what can they hope for? I mean, this sounds reasonable. Let's just, everybody forget it. Everybody go home. We're good. How stupid can you get? Stupid. Michelle Knight, one of the real victims in this case, had the courage to face him and speak the truth. And in fact, in a pre-sentencing evaluation, Dr. Frank Oakberg, a pioneer in trauma science, wrote that Knight suffered the longest and most severely. He said it was Michelle who served as a doctor, nurse, midwife, and pediatrician during the birth of Amanda's child. She breathed life into that infant when she wasn't breathing. He wrote, at other times she interceded when Castro sought to abuse Gina, interposing herself and absorbing physical and sexual trauma. But each survivor had a will to prevail and use that will to live through the ordeal. There was no question of who the true heroes were and who the true villain was in that situation. So what does Ariel Castro go on to do? Serve his lifelong prison sentence? Try to repent? No, not a chance. Approximately 1 month into his life sentence, Castro hanged himself from a bedsheet in his detention cell. This was a man who'd make the devil blush with his sins, with the misery he inflicted on women, and yet, after putting Michelle, Amanda, and Gina through hell for 11 years, he couldn't take it for a month. Castro kept a journal in prison, which he had often complained about the quality of food, and wrote that he was convinced that prison guards were out to get him. He complained that his cell and toilet were filthy. I hope so. This man was getting exactly what he deserved. He was a prisoner, controlled by guards with no way out, just like what he had done to those women all those years. In fact, he was being treated better, way better in prison than the women he had tortured. He wasn't being beaten and raped, and no matter what the quality of food was, and we all know prison's a far cry from the Ritz, this man was getting fed regularly by law. But he couldn't hack it. When the captor became the captive, he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. It's interesting to note that when Castro apparently, of course, don't know exactly what happened for sure, but when he apparently took his own life, that really had an impact on the three victims in this case. We certainly know it did with Michelle. And here's the thing, nothing that happens after you spend so many years being held as a victim of this kind of torture, sexual assault, molestation, kidnapping, nothing is going to make that right. But victims like this often say that they do get a sense of justice when they know that the perpetrator is having to serve time. When this individual is in prison and is having to go through some measure of what they had to go through. Michelle, for example, spent 11 years being a captive. And now, as she said in court, your hell is just beginning, and it's going to last an eternity. But at the 30-day mark, he takes his own life. And in a sense, that's cheating Michelle and the other two out of a measure of justice. And those that have been in this situation, like Michelle, have often told me that's how they feel, that they were completely cheated because they don't get this sense of him having to pay month after month, year after year, the way they had to pay. They don't get a sense of justice that he's trapped in there the way they were trapped, and that he's having to look at those four walls the way they had to look at those four walls. They're having to manage a deep sense of grief and a deep sense of injustice that maybe knowing that he's having to go through some of that himself gives them some sense of equity. And whenever he does that, he cheats them out of that. That's really sad. He got to make a choice. They didn't get to make a choice. He took choice away from them, and now he chooses to exit the situation. And that's another injustice. It's just another slap in the face. It's another way of cheating them. And now, enough about Ariel Castro, the man who was the focus of these women's lives for that long. 11 years for Michelle and multiple years for Amanda and Gina. So what has happened since then? Well, Amanda Berry is now focused on raising the daughter she gave birth to while in captivity. In the years since her escape, Amanda has dedicated herself to advocating for missing persons in Northeast Ohio. While imprisoned in Castro's home, he allowed her to watch news reports of people searching for her, a cruel reminder of the world she had been stolen from. Determined to help others, Amanda began hosting a daily news segment on Cleveland's Fox 8, ensuring that missing individuals remain in the public eye. She knows firsthand how much hope it can bring, just as it did for her when she saw that people were still looking. In April 2015, Amanda and Gina DeJesus shared their powerful story in Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland, detailing their years in captivity and the resilience that carried them through. Gina has also transformed her traumatic past into a mission to help others. In 2018, alongside her cousin, she founded the Cleveland Family Center, an organization dedicated to providing comprehensive support to families of missing persons. From the moment a report is filed through the recovery process, the center offers a wide range of free services, ensuring that no family has to face the overwhelming search for a loved one alone. Their mission is to provide guidance, resources, and advocacy for those navigating one of the most difficult experiences imaginable. And now, what about Michelle? The one described as a hero. Now known as Lily Rose Lee, Lily Rose has gone on to do great things since her escape and our sit-down interview. She even came back a year later to give us an update. In the years since, Lily has become an activist, author, and speaker who helps animals and advocates for change. She became a New York Times and international best-selling author with her memoir, Finding Me, A Decade of Darkness, A Life Reclaimed, and her follow-up book, Life After Darkness, Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnappings. In 2015, a film based on her memoir, Cleveland Abduction, aired on the Lifetime Movie Network. She met her husband, Miguel Rodriguez, through mutual friends on Facebook, and they have been married since May 6, 2016, the anniversary of her escape. Of course, the scars of captivity remain. The years Michelle, now Lily, spent under Castro's cruelty left her unable to have biological children. Her eyesight is permanently damaged from years spent in darkness, and the tremor in her hands, a lingering effect of the brutal head injuries he inflicted, was evident during our interview. Perhaps the deepest wound of all, her beloved son was adopted by another family while she was held captive. A loss no mother should have to endure. Yet through it all, she has never given up. Castro did the unthinkable, but he could never break her spirit. This is a story of resilience, of holding on to hope, faith in the face of unimaginable horror. And I know that the strength of these women has not only inspired, but also helped others on their own paths to healing. Thank you for sharing this time with me on this journey. I'm DrPhil. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you can reach out to the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673. Now, this hotline is operated by RAINN, R-A-I-N-N, and connects you with local sexual assault service providers who can offer free, confidential support and resources. Don't hesitate to reach out for help. I can promise you that you won't be pressured into doing anything you don't want to do. They're there to listen, and they'll meet you where you are. They don't pressure you to meet them where they are. 1-800-656-HOPE. 1-800-656-4673. You are not alone. I'll see you next time.